Comment if kindness can change a powerful man, and subscribe for unforgettable stories. The day a company learns to fear one man, it also forgets how to tell him the truth. That sentence moved through the 43rd floor of Harrison Capitol long before 8 o'clock in the morning. It drifted between glass offices, echoed through polished hallways, and settled over every desk like an invisible fog. Nobody said it loudly. Nobody needed to. Everyone already knew who it was about. Liam Harrison, the billionaire CEO whose name appeared on magazine covers, business podcasts, and financial news broadcasts across America. The man who had built a billion-dollar empire before turning 40. The man employees respected, admired, and feared in equal measure. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glowed beneath a pale autumn sunrise. The city looked beautiful from up here. Quiet, hopeful. But inside Harrison Capitol, nobody seemed to notice. Computer screens flickered on. Coffee cups trembled slightly in nervous hands. Conversations stopped whenever the executive elevator chimed. Because everyone knew what happened when Liam Harrison arrived. At exactly 8 a.m., the elevator doors slid open. Silence followed. Not complete silence. The air conditioning still hummed softly overhead. Keyboards still clicked occasionally. But something changed. Something tightened. Liam stepped forward in a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it looked sculpted rather than sewn. At 6'3", broad-shouldered and athletic, he moved with the calm certainty of someone who never doubted his next decision. His dark blonde hair was neatly styled. His expression revealed nothing. Not anger. Not kindness. Nothing at all. People lowered their eyes as he walked past. Some straightened their posture. Others pretended to concentrate harder on their work. Nobody greeted him. Nobody smiled. Liam never asked for fear. Yet somehow he had become its center. He continued toward the boardroom, where the weekly executive briefing was already waiting. 12 senior managers sat around a long black table. The atmosphere felt less like a meeting and more like an exam nobody wanted to take. Liam placed a folder on the table and sat down. Begin. His voice was calm, controlled, the kind of voice that never needed volume to command attention. A nervous executive named Nathan Wells started presenting quarterly figures. The first few slides went smoothly. Revenue targets, client growth, investment forecasts. Then it happened. A small mistake. Just one number. One projection entered incorrectly. Most companies would have corrected it and moved on. Harrison Capitol was different. Liam noticed instantly. Stop. The single word froze the room. Nathan swallowed hard. Sir. Liam tapped the screen with a silver pen. That figure is wrong. Nathan's face lost color. I'll correct it immediately. You reviewed this report 3 times. Yes, sir. And your team reviewed it twice. Yes, sir. Liam nodded slowly. Then explained how a $7 million forecasting error remained unnoticed. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Nathan opened his mouth, searching desperately for an explanation. None came. Liam leaned back slightly. Not angry. Somehow that was worse. Details matter, he said quietly. Because people make decisions based on them. Nathan lowered his eyes. Understood. Liam closed the folder. Meeting adjourned. That was it. No shouting. No insults. No humiliation. Yet everyone left feeling shaken. Because Liam Harrison's disappointment carried more weight than another man's rage. 30 minutes later, the story had already spread through the building. By lunchtime, employees would retell it in whispers. Another example. Another warning. Another reason not to attract the CEO's attention. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Chloe Bennett stepped off a crowded subway train and adjusted the strap of her handbag. She had no idea what kind of storm waited for her. At 26, Chloe looked every bit the professional assistant she had worked so hard to become. Her long blonde hair was tied neatly back. Her navy blazer was simple but elegant. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind earned through years of solving problems without needing recognition. New York had never intimidated her. Life had already given her tougher challenges. Growing up after losing her father young, watching her mother work 2 jobs, learning that kindness mattered most when circumstances encouraged bitterness. Those lessons stayed with her. As she approached Harrison Tower, sunlight reflected across the glass facade like liquid gold. The building seemed impossibly tall, powerful, intimidating. Chloe paused for a second, not because she was afraid, because she felt grateful. This job mattered. It represented a fresh start, a better future, an opportunity she intended to earn. Inside the lobby, security processed her temporary badge. Several employees glanced at her sympathetically when they learned she was joining the executive floor. One woman actually winced. "Executive floor?" she asked. "Good luck." Chloe smiled politely. "Is it really that bad?" The woman hesitated. "Let's just say nobody stays there very long." Another employee laughed nervously. "Especially assistants." Chloe noticed something strange. Nobody criticized the company. Nobody complained about the pay. Nobody questioned Liam's intelligence. They only seemed afraid of him. That distinction interested her. Fear and cruelty were not always the same thing. By the time she entered the executive elevator, curiosity had begun replacing nervousness. The elevator climbed higher and higher until the city unfolded beneath her like a living map. When the doors finally opened, Chloe stepped onto the 43rd floor. Conversation stopped. Heads turned briefly toward the newcomer. Then everyone returned to work. The tension was impossible to miss. It hung in the air like static before a thunderstorm. Chloe looked around quietly. Glass walls, modern artwork, expensive furniture, serious faces. And beyond it all, at the far end of the floor, a closed office with dark wooden doors. The office of Liam Harrison. At that exact moment, inside those doors, the CEO stood alone beside a window overlooking Manhattan. Thousands of people filled the streets below. Millions filled the city beyond. Yet somehow he had never felt more isolated. On a small table beside him sat a silver-framed photograph, the only personal item in the entire office. Liam's. Eyes rested on it briefly before he looked away. Work was easier than memories. Work was predictable. People were not. What he did not know was that somewhere beyond those walls, a new secretary had just arrived. And before long, she would do something nobody in the company had dared do for years. The orientation session lasted less than 20 minutes. Yet Chloe learned more from what people avoided saying than from what they actually told her. The human resources manager smiled professionally while explaining schedules, reporting structures, and executive protocols. But every time Liam Harrison's name appeared, a subtle tension crept into the room. It was there in the quick glances, the careful choice of words, the way voices lowered without anyone consciously deciding to do so. By mid-morning, Chloe had been shown her workstation just outside the executive offices. The desk was modern, spotless, and positioned close enough to Liam's office that she could hear the faint opening and closing of his door throughout the day. Several employees introduced themselves politely, though none stayed long enough for a real conversation. Everyone seemed busy, or perhaps cautious. Around 10 o'clock, a woman from finance named Rebecca stopped beside Chloe's desk and placed a welcome folder down gently. "First day?" she asked. Chloe smiled. "Is it that obvious?" Rebecca laughed softly. "You still look relaxed." Chloe noticed the response immediately. "Does that change?" Rebecca hesitated. "Usually." Before Chloe could ask another question, Rebecca glanced toward Liam's office and lowered her voice. "Just remember one thing. Keep everything organized. He notices everything." Then she walked away. Notices everything. The phrase lingered in Chloe's mind. She spent the next hour reviewing executive calendars and internal systems. Harrison Capital operated with astonishing precision. Meetings started exactly on time. Reports arrived exactly when requested. Deadlines were rarely missed. The entire company seemed to move according to an invisible rhythm created by one man. Yet beneath that efficiency, something felt off. It was difficult to define. The office was successful. Employees were well compensated. The environment was professional. But joy seemed strangely absent. Nobody decorated their desks with much personality. Conversations stayed brief. Laughter appeared rare. It was as though everyone feared making too much noise. Shortly before noon, Chloe stood to stretch and glanced across the executive floor. That was when she noticed Liam for the first time since arriving. He emerged from his office carrying a tablet and walked toward a private conference room. Every movement seemed deliberate, every step measured. Several managers immediately shifted out of his path. Liam did not acknowledge them. He did not appear arrogant. He simply looked distant, like a man whose thoughts were always somewhere else. Chloe watched him disappear around the corner. Then she returned to work. At exactly 12:30, something unusual happened. The floor remained busy. Phones continued ringing. Keyboards continued clicking, but Liam's office door opened once again. This time, he was alone. No assistants. No executives. No meetings. Chloe looked up as he walked toward a private dining area positioned near a row of windows overlooking the city. What caught her attention was not the destination. It was the routine. Several employees barely glanced up, as if they had seen this exact scene hundreds of times before. Curious, Chloe checked the time. 12:30 on the dot. Through the glass wall separating the dining area, she watched Liam sit at the same table. A small lunch had already been prepared. Nothing extravagant. Grilled chicken, salad, mineral water. Simple. Predictable. Then she noticed something else. A silver-framed photograph sitting beside the table. The same photograph she had glimpsed through his office doorway earlier. Liam placed the tablet aside and stared quietly through the window. He did not touch his food for several minutes. He simply sat there, alone. The image felt strangely sad. Not dramatic. Not tragic. Just lonely. Chloe looked away before she could stare too long. Yet the scene stayed with her. During lunch, most executives gathered in groups. They discussed investments, clients, travel plans, and weekend events. Liam sat by himself. Every day, apparently. The afternoon moved quickly. Chloe handled scheduling requests, updated executive reports, and learned the preferences of various department heads. More than once she heard stories about Liam. None came directly from him. They traveled through the office like modern myths. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without raising his voice. He remembered details from meetings held years earlier. He answered emails at impossible hours. Some employees admired him deeply. Others seemed intimidated. Most appeared to feel both. Around 3 o'clock, Chloe received her first direct communication from the CEO. A short email arrived in her inbox. No greeting. No unnecessary language. Just 3 sentences requesting updates to the executive calendar. Efficient. Clear. Professional. Chloe completed the task immediately and sent confirmation. Less than 60 seconds later, a reply appeared. Received. Thank you. She blinked. The response surprised her. It was simple, but not cold. Not rude. Just concise. Another contradiction. The terrifying CEO apparently said thank you. As the afternoon sunlight shifted across the skyline, Chloe continued observing the culture around her. People feared making mistakes. They feared disappointing expectations. But the more she watched, the less she believed Liam himself was the entire reason. Fear had grown beyond the man. It had become part of the company, part of the atmosphere, a system feeding itself. Near 5 o'clock, she gathered several files and walked toward the executive records room. Passing the conference corridor, she noticed a door standing slightly open. Inside sat Liam Harrison, alone once again. The meeting room was empty except for him. Papers covered the table. Financial projections, client reports, strategic plans. Yet his attention was not on any of them. His gaze rested on the silver-framed photograph. The expression on his face was unlike anything Chloe had seen all day. Not powerful, not intimidating, just tired, deeply tired. Before she could move away, Liam closed the frame gently and looked toward the doorway. Their eyes met for the briefest second. Chloe immediately continued walking, not wanting to intrude. But something about that moment unsettled her. Because for the first time all day, she had not seen a millionaire CEO. She had seen a man carrying something heavy. And somehow, she suspected the photograph held the answer. The next evening, delivering reports after the floor had gone quiet, Chloe saw the photograph clearly. Before caution stopped her, she asked the question nobody else dared ask. Who is she? For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of the city filtered through the glass, while rain painted faint silver trails down the windows. Chloe stood near the door, unsure whether she should apologize for asking or simply leave. Yet Liam did not seem angry. If anything, he seemed far away. His eyes remained fixed on the photograph. Her name was Sophie, he said at last. The words emerged softly, as though speaking them required effort. She was 6 years younger than me. Chloe glanced toward the frame again. The young woman in the picture looked full of life, her smile bright enough to illuminate the entire image. She looks happy, Chloe said gently. A faint expression crossed Liam's face. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. She usually was. Another silence followed. Chloe sensed that most people in the company had never heard him speak this way. Perhaps nobody had asked. Perhaps nobody had dared. Liam rested one hand on the edge of the desk. When we were younger, Sophie believed every problem could be solved by talking to people. His gaze drifted toward the skyline. I believed every problem could be solved by working harder. Chloe listened quietly. She used to tell me I took life too seriously. For the first time, there was a trace of warmth in his voice. She was probably right. The comment surprised both of them. Liam seemed to realize he had revealed more in 2 minutes than he normally revealed in a year. The familiar walls returned almost immediately. His posture straightened. His expression settled back into control. Yet something had already changed. Chloe could feel it. I am sorry for your loss, she said sincerely. Liam nodded once. Thank you. He looked toward the stack of reports she had delivered earlier. Was there anything else? The question was polite, but Chloe understood it was also an ending. She smiled softly. No, I have everything I need. As she left the office, she felt dozens of unanswered questions following her into the hallway. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, yet Chloe found herself noticing things she had missed before. Employees spoke about Liam as if he were some distant force of nature rather than a human being. When he entered a room, conversations stopped. When he requested revisions, people acted as though disaster had struck. Yet every interaction she personally witnessed was professional. Demanding, certainly. Precise, absolutely. But never cruel. The contradiction fascinated her. Around 6 o'clock, most of the executive floor began emptying. One by one, lights switched off. Elevators carried employees home to families, dinners, and evenings away from spreadsheets. Chloe finished organizing the final schedules for the following day and gathered her belongings. As she prepared to leave, she noticed a familiar glow beneath Liam's office door. He was still there. The same was true an hour later when she reached the lobby after realizing she had forgotten her umbrella upstairs and returned to retrieve it. The light remained on. By 8 o'clock, rain continued falling across the city. Chloe finally stepped outside with her umbrella open against the weather. Yet as she crossed the street, she glanced upward toward the 43rd floor. One office remained illuminated. Liam's. The sight stayed with her all evening. The next morning, the city awoke beneath clear skies. Sunshine reflected off glass towers and transformed yesterday's rain into sparkling puddles along the pavement. Chloe arrived early, carrying a takeaway coffee and a small sense of curiosity she could not quite explain. When she reached the executive floor, she immediately noticed something unusual. Liam's office light was already on. It was only 7:15. He had arrived before almost everyone else. Again, as the day progressed, meetings filled every available space on the calendar. Investors called. Executives rushed between conference rooms. Market updates arrived continuously. Harrison Capital moved at full speed. Shortly before midday, Chloe found herself reviewing several scheduling conflicts when Rebecca approached her desk carrying a folder. You survived another day, Rebecca said with a smile. That seems to surprise everyone. Rebecca laughed. You have no idea. She hesitated before adding. Most assistants spend their first weeks terrified. Chloe considered that. Maybe everyone spends so much time fearing him that they forget to actually look at him. Rebecca blinked. What does that mean? Chloe glanced toward the office at the end of the corridor. I think he is lonelier than anyone realizes. Rebecca stared for a moment before shaking her head gently. You are definitely new here. Then she walked away. At exactly 12:30, Liam followed the same routine once more. Same table, same view, same photograph. This time, however, Chloe noticed something different. A chair sat opposite him. Empty, untouched, waiting. For reasons she could not explain, the sight made her chest tighten slightly. Day after day, month after month, year after year, the same solitary lunch, the same silence, the same memories. Most people saw a millionaire chief executive. Chloe was beginning to see something else. A man frozen at a particular moment in his life, carrying grief so long that it had become part of his identity. And for the first time since joining Harrison Capital, a thought entered her mind that would have horrified everyone else on the executive floor. Maybe the most intimidating person in the building was also the person who needed kindness the most. The thought stayed with Chloe for the rest of the week. It followed her through meetings, spreadsheets, and endless calendar updates. Every day confirmed the same pattern. Liam Harrison arrived before everyone else and left long after the building had emptied. Every day at 12:30, he sat alone beside the window with Sophie's photograph. Every day people stepped carefully around him, as though proximity itself carried risk. Yet the more Chloe observed him, the less frightening he seemed. 1. Thursday afternoon. A sudden scheduling problem created the first real challenge of her new role. Two major investors had been accidentally booked into overlapping meetings. The mistake had originated 3 departments away, but by the time it reached the executive floor, panic spread quickly. Managers exchanged worried emails. Assistants rushed between offices. Nobody wanted to be associated with the error. Chloe reviewed the situation carefully. Within 10 minutes, she identified a solution that would allow both meetings to proceed with only minor adjustments. She prepared a revised schedule and carried it directly to Liam's office. When she entered, he was reviewing a stack of reports. Without looking up, he said, "What is it?" Chloe placed the revised schedule on his desk. There was a conflict involving the Northbridge investors and the Horizon Group meeting. Liam immediately looked up. "I am aware." His expression suggested he expected another problem. "It has already been resolved," Chloe replied. He studied the document. Silence filled the room as his eyes moved across the revised timetable. Finally, he nodded once. Efficient. It was a simple word, but Chloe had already learned it represented high praise coming from him. "Thank you." She turned to leave. "Miss Bennett." She paused. Liam rarely initiated additional conversation. "Yes." He tapped the schedule lightly. Most people would have spent an hour discussing responsibility. You spent 10 minutes finding a solution. Chloe smiled. Problems usually care more about solutions than blame. For a brief second, something unexpected appeared in his eyes. Interest. Then it vanished. Noted. As Chloe left the office, she felt strangely encouraged. The exchange had lasted less than a minute, yet it revealed something important. Beneath the reputation, Liam respected competence. Perhaps more than that, he respected honesty. The following Monday brought another discovery. Chloe arrived early and stopped at a cafe across the street before work. While waiting for her coffee, she noticed a familiar figure sitting alone near the window. Liam Harrison. No security team. No executives. No expensive breakfast. Meeting. Just Liam with a black coffee and a notebook. He appeared so different outside the office that she almost doubted her eyes. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like an ordinary man enjoying a quiet morning. Chloe considered leaving him alone. Then she noticed something else. The seat opposite him was empty, just as it always was. Before she could overthink the decision, she ordered a second coffee. Carrying both cups, she approached his table. Liam looked up immediately. Surprise flickered across his face. It might have been the first time anyone had voluntarily approached him outside work. Chloe placed the extra coffee on the table. "You look like you could use this." For a moment, he simply stared at the cup, then at her. Around them, cafe conversations continued as normal. Nobody seemed aware that one of the city's most influential executives was sitting among them. "Most people avoid my table," Liam said quietly. Chloe pulled out the chair opposite him. "That seems unfortunate." The statement earned the faintest elevator at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but closer than she had ever seen. "Do you always ignore unwritten rules?" he asked. Chloe sat down. "Only the bad ones." The answer surprised him enough that he actually looked amused. The expression transformed his face. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal the man hidden beneath years of discipline and distance. They spoke for only 15 minutes. Nothing personal, nothing profound. Traffic, coffee, a new development project in the city. Yet when Chloe eventually stood to leave for work, something subtle had shifted. For the first time in years, Liam had shared a table with someone who expected nothing from him. No approval, no promotion, no business advantage, just conversation. Later that day, employees noticed a change they could not explain. Liam remained demanding. Meetings remained precise. Expectations remained high. Yet there was a slight difference in his tone. A fraction more patience. A little less tension. Nobody understood why. Nobody connected it to a simple cup of coffee shared before sunrise. But Chloe noticed. And so did Liam. Because as he sat alone, at 12:30 beside Sophie's photograph, he found himself looking at the empty chair across from him differently than before. For the first time in a very long time, it no longer seemed impossible to imagine someone sitting there. Over the next 2 weeks, small changes began appearing throughout Harrison Capital. They were so subtle that most employees failed to notice them at first. A meeting that ended with Liam thanking a department head for exceptional preparation. A junior analyst receiving encouragement instead of silence after presenting a difficult report. A conversation in the hallway where the chief executive actually paused long enough to ask a follow-up question. None of these moments were dramatic. Yet in a company where every gesture from Liam Harrison carried weight, they felt almost revolutionary. The atmosphere on the executive floor remained disciplined, but some of the fear that had once filled every corner seemed to loosen its grip. Chloe noticed it immediately. Others noticed it later. Nobody understood the reason. Meanwhile, Liam found himself paying closer attention to things he had ignored for years. He noticed how employees relaxed whenever he left a meeting. He noticed how often people apologized before offering suggestions. He noticed how frequently silence replaced honesty. The realization unsettled him. For years he had believed he was creating excellence. Now he wondered whether he had accidentally created distance. One Tuesday afternoon, the question lingered in his mind long after everyone else had forgotten the meeting that triggered it. A project manager had presented a proposal that clearly needed improvement. Halfway through the presentation, the manager became visibly nervous and started second-guessing every recommendation. Liam recognized the pattern instantly because he had seen it hundreds of times before. People feared making mistakes more than they valued contributing ideas. After the meeting ended, he stood alone in his office looking across the city. The skyline stretched endlessly beneath a bright autumn sky. Sophie's photograph rested beside him as always. Without thinking, he found himself remembering something. She had once said years ago, "If people are afraid of disappointing you, Liam, eventually they will stop showing you who they really are." At the time, he had dismissed the comment. Now it echoed through the quiet office with uncomfortable clarity. Later that afternoon, Chloe knocked gently before entering. "You asked for the updated board schedules." Liam nodded. She placed the documents on his desk and noticed he seemed distracted. "Everything all right?" The question escaped before she could reconsider it. Most employees would never have asked. Liam looked up from the papers. "Do I seem distracted?" "A little." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "I have been thinking about something." Chloe waited. "Do you know what people do when they enter a room with me?" She smiled faintly. Most of them stopped breathing for a few seconds. To her surprise, Liam laughed softly. A genuine laugh. Brief, but real. "That obvious?" "Very." The amusement faded and was replaced by reflection. "I spent years believing respect and fear were close relatives." Chloe pulled out a chair and sat down. "And now?" Liam looked toward the window. "Now I am not so sure." For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Finally Chloe said, "My mother used to tell me something when I was younger." Liam glanced toward her. "What was that?" "The strongest people are not the ones who make others feel small. They are the ones who make others feel safe enough to grow." The words settled quietly between them. Liam lowered his gaze toward the photograph beside his desk. Sophie would have liked Chloe. The thought arrived unexpectedly. It also hurt less than it once would have. That evening, long after most employees had gone home, Liam remained in his office reviewing quarterly reports. Around 8:30, he noticed movement beyond the glass walls. Chloe was still working at her desk. He checked the time. Everyone else had left nearly an hour earlier. Curious, he stepped outside his office. "Why are you still here?" Chloe looked up from her laptop. "I could ask you the same question. I own the company, and I have deadlines." The answer made him shake his head with amusement. "That is not a real explanation." Chloe closed the laptop. "Neither is yours." For a second, they simply looked at each other. Then Liam realized something unusual. She spoke to him exactly the same way she spoke to everyone else. Not disrespectfully, not fearfully. Honestly, it was a rare quality. Perhaps the rarest he had encountered in years. "You should go home," he said. "Only if you do too." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Are you giving instructions to your employer?" "I am making a recommendation to someone who clearly works too much." Another faint smile appeared. "That sounds suspiciously like criticism." Constructive criticism. The smile remained even after she gathered her things and headed toward the elevator. As the doors closed, Chloe offered a small wave and disappeared from sight. The executive floor became quiet again. Yet for the first time in a very long while, the silence did not feel empty. Liam returned to his office and looked at Sophie's photograph. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows like scattered stars. Slowly, he picked up the frame. "You would have liked her," he said softly. The words surprised him. Not because they were untrue, Because it was the first time in 12 years that remembering Sophie felt connected to hope instead of grief. The following week began with bright sunshine spilling across Manhattan and a rare sense of optimism drifting through Harrison Capital. Employees could not quite explain why the atmosphere felt different. The deadlines were still demanding. The expectations remained high. The pace had not slowed. Yet something subtle had changed. People spoke a little more freely in meetings. Junior staff volunteered ideas more often. Even laughter appeared occasionally in the break room. It was not a transformation. It was a beginning. Chloe noticed it everywhere. She noticed it when a nervous analyst successfully presented a proposal without being interrupted by fear. She noticed it when Rebecca from finance smiled after leaving a board meeting instead of looking relieved to have survived it. Most of all, she noticed it in Liam. The walls around him were still there, but cracks had begun to appear. Small ones. Human ones. One Wednesday afternoon, Chloe was reviewing travel arrangements when a notification appeared on her screen. A charity foundation had requested Harrison Capital's participation in an upcoming community development project. Similar requests arrived regularly and were usually handled by other departments. This one, however, included a familiar name. Sophie Harrison Community Scholarship Fund. Chloe stared at the screen. She had never heard anyone mention it before. Curious, she opened the file. 12 years earlier, shortly after Sophie's passing, Liam had personally established a scholarship program supporting disadvantaged students pursuing higher education. Hundreds of young people had benefited from it. Millions of dollars had been invested. Yet almost nobody inside the company seemed aware it existed. Chloe read through the details twice. The discovery surprised her. The public knew Liam as a brilliant executive. Employees knew him as a demanding leader. Yet hidden behind both identities was a man quietly changing lives without seeking recognition. Later that afternoon, she carried several documents into his office. Liam was standing beside the window when she entered. "I found the scholarship files," Chloe said. He turned slightly. "Which files?" "The Sophie Harrison Foundation." The reaction was immediate. Not defensive, just unexpected. Liam looked toward the papers in her hands. "I forgot those were being reviewed this month." Chloe placed them carefully on his desk. "You never mention it." He remained silent for several moments. Finally, he said, "It was never about publicity." Chloe glanced at the foundation reports. 532 students received assistance last year. Liam looked away. Sophie believed education opened doors that circumstances tried to keep closed. His voice softened slightly. "The foundation was her idea long before it became mine." Chloe smiled. "She sounds remarkable." A faint expression crossed his face. She was. For a moment, the office felt unusually peaceful. Sunlight reflected across the glass towers outside, filling the room with warm afternoon light. Then Chloe noticed something else. Every time Liam spoke about Sophie now, the pain remained, but it no longer seemed impossible for him to bear. The memories were changing. Slowly. The following evening, Harrison Capital hosted an internal networking event for employees and community partners. Attendance was encouraged, but not mandatory. Most people expected Liam to appear briefly before returning to work. That was his usual pattern. Around 6:30, the event was already underway. Conversations filled the large reception area. Music played softly in the background. Employees mingled in small groups while overlooking the city skyline. Chloe stood near one of the windows speaking with Rebecca when the room suddenly grew quieter. Liam had arrived. Not because he commanded attention, because people still instinctively noticed him. Yet something unusual happened next. Instead of remaining isolated near the executives, he began moving through the room. He spoke with junior employees, asked questions, listened to answers. Several people looked genuinely stunned. Rebecca leaned toward Chloe. "I have worked here 6 years, and I have never seen him do this." Across the room, Liam stopped to congratulate a graduate analyst on a successful project. The young employee nearly dropped his drink from surprise. Chloe could not help smiling. The change was real. Not dramatic. Not magical. Just real. A little later, Liam approached where Chloe was standing. "Enjoying the evening?" he asked. "Apparently history is being made." He raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Chloe glanced around the room. "Half the company looks shocked that you are talking to people voluntarily." For a second, Liam seemed embarrassed. Then he laughed quietly. "That bad?" "Worse." The response earned another genuine smile. Around them, Conversations continued, but Chloe noticed something important. Employees were watching, not because of gossip, because they were witnessing something unfamiliar. Their intimidating chief executive looked human, approachable, almost happy. As the evening drew to a close and the city lights began sparkling beneath the darkening sky, Liam found himself standing beside the windows with Chloe once more. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable now. Finally, Liam looked out across Manhattan and said, "You know, when you first arrived here, everyone expected you to leave." Chloe laughed softly. "Including me some days." He shook his head. "Not because you were incapable, because nobody believed you would tolerate the environment." Chloe considered that. "Maybe I saw something they did not." Liam turned toward her. "And what was that?" She looked at him for a moment before answering. "A good man who forgot people could care about him without wanting something in return." The words settled quietly between them. For once, Liam had no immediate response, because deep down, he was beginning to realize she might be right. The conversation lingered in Liam's mind long after the networking event ended, long after the final employees had gone home, long after the city lights had blurred into reflections against the glass walls of his office. A good man who forgot people could care about him without wanting something in return. He had spent years assuming every relationship came attached to expectations. Investors expected results. Executives expected leadership. Reporters expected headlines. Even acquaintances expected access. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing that simple kindness existed without conditions. Yet Chloe continued proving otherwise. She never asked for favors, never sought special treatment, never seemed impressed by his wealth or position. She simply treated him like a person. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. The following Monday began with clear skies and unusually warm autumn weather. Sunlight poured across Manhattan, turning the glass towers gold. Inside Harrison Capital, however, the atmosphere shifted abruptly before 9 o'clock. News arrived that one of the company's largest international partnerships was facing unexpected complications. Not a collapse. Not yet. But the kind of problem that could damage confidence if fear reached investors before facts did. Meetings were added. Calls were scheduled. Forecasts were revised. The executive floor quickly returned to its familiar state of controlled urgency. Liam moved from one meeting to another without pause. By midday, he had barely touched the lunch sitting untouched beside his desk. Chloe noticed immediately. She also noticed the growing tension around him. Not anger. Exhaustion. The kind that accumulates quietly over months and years until it becomes invisible even to the person carrying it. At 12:30, Liam followed his usual routine and headed toward the dining area near the windows. The silver-framed photograph sat waiting beside the table. Yet today felt different. The calls continued. Messages arrived constantly. Twice he checked his phone during lunch. 3 times he opened documents he had intended to review later. The meal remained mostly untouched. From her desk, Chloe watched discreetly. She remembered the countless evenings he stayed late, the early mornings, the endless responsibilities. Success had given him influence, but it had also taken something from him. Peace. Around 1 o'clock, Liam returned to his office. An hour later, another strategy meeting began. Department heads gathered around the conference table while financial projections glowed across a large screen. The discussion was productive at first. Then the room became noticeably warmer. Several executives loosened their ties. Someone adjusted the temperature controls. Liam remained focused on the presentation. Yet Chloe noticed a slight change. He rubbed the bridge of his nose more than once. His concentration seemed strained. During a discussion about projected market trends, he paused unexpectedly. The interruption lasted only a second. Most people missed it. Chloe did not. Liam continued speaking, but something seemed off. A few minutes later, the meeting ended. Executives collected their notes and filed out. Chloe was organizing documents nearby when she saw Liam remain seated after everyone else had left. His posture looked unusually rigid. Concern tugged at her immediately. She approached the doorway and knocked gently. "Everything okay?" Liam looked up. For a moment, he appeared surprised to see her. "Fine." The answer came too quickly. Chloe folded her arms lightly. That did not sound convincing. A faint smile appeared despite his obvious fatigue. "You seem determined to challenge every answer I give. Only the inaccurate ones." He shook his head softly. "I am simply tired." The admission itself felt significant. Liam rarely acknowledged weakness of any kind. Chloe stepped inside. Then maybe you should rest for 10 minutes. I have another meeting in 12. The company will survive a 10-minute break. Liam looked as though he wanted to argue. Instead, he leaned back slightly and closed his eyes for a brief moment. The gesture lasted only seconds, but it revealed how exhausted he truly was. Chloe's concern deepened. When was the last time you took a day off? His eyes opened again. I do not remember. That is not a healthy answer. It is an honest one. The room fell quiet. Outside the windows, sunlight reflected off the river far below. The city continued moving at its relentless pace. Chloe glanced toward Sophie's photograph resting on a nearby shelf. Then she looked back at Liam. You spend so much time taking care of everything else. Her voice softened slightly. Who takes care of you? The question caught him completely off guard. No executive had ever asked it. No investor. No journalist. Perhaps no one in years. Liam looked away toward the skyline. He did not have an answer. And for the first time, the absence of one felt impossible to ignore. The question followed Liam long after Chloe left the office. It remained with him through the next meeting, through the stream of emails waiting for responses, through every decision that demanded his attention. Who takes care of you? Such a simple question. Yet it unsettled him more than any financial crisis ever had. Because he realized he genuinely did not know the answer. For years, work had filled every available space in his life. Success became routine. Responsibility became identity. Grief became something he carried quietly between meetings and quarterly reports. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped expecting anyone to notice. That evening, the executive floor gradually emptied as employees headed home. One by one, office lights switched off. Conversations faded. Elevators carried people back to their families, friends, and ordinary lives. By 7:30, only a handful of lights remained visible across the floor. One belonged to Liam's office. Another belonged to Chloe's desk. She was finishing several scheduling updates when she noticed movement through the glass wall. Liam stood beside the window again, staring out across the city. Something about his posture seemed different. Less guarded. More reflective. After a moment, she gathered her laptop and prepared to leave. As she passed his office, she noticed the door standing slightly open. Normally, she would have continued walking. Tonight, she paused. You are still here. Liam turned. A faint smile appeared. You are too. I am leaving. Chloe adjusted the strap of her bag. You should consider doing the same. That recommendation again. It remains a good one. To her surprise, Liam looked toward the stack of unfinished reports on his desk, then back toward the city. Perhaps. The answer caught her off guard. It was not agreement exactly, but it was closer than she expected. 20 minutes later, Chloe stepped outside onto a busy Manhattan street illuminated by headlights and glowing shop windows. She had barely walked half a block when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Miss Bennett. She turned. Liam stood several meters away holding his coat over one arm. For a second, she simply stared. You actually left. Apparently. The response carried a trace of amusement. Together, they began walking slowly along the sidewalk. Neither seemed entirely sure how the situation had happened. They spoke about ordinary things. A new cafe opening nearby. Autumn weather. A public art installation appearing in a nearby park. Nothing related to work. Nothing related to company performance. The conversation felt surprisingly natural. As they passed a small bookstore, Chloe noticed Liam glance toward the display window. Do you read much? She asked. He nodded. Mostly biographies. History. Business. That sounds exactly like what I expected. And that is bad. Not bad. Predictable. Liam laughed softly. What do you read? Everything. Chloe smiled. Novels. Travel stories. Mystery books. Anything that reminds me there is a world beyond emails. They continued walking. The city around them seemed calmer somehow. Less rushed. Less demanding. For the first time in years, Liam realized he was enjoying an evening without checking the time every few minutes. Eventually, they reached a small park overlooking the river. Lights reflected across the water in shimmering patterns. A cool breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves. They stopped near a bench facing the skyline. Neither sat down. The view was too beautiful. Sophie would have loved this place, Liam said unexpectedly. Chloe turned toward him. He was looking across the river, but she sensed he was seeing a memory instead. She loved finding quiet places in busy cities. A gentle smile appeared. She used to say every city had hidden corners where people remembered how to breathe. Chloe listened quietly. Liam rarely spoke this openly. She sounds wise. She was annoying, he said with surprising affection. And optimistic. And usually right. They both laughed. The sound felt light against the evening air. Then silence settled comfortably between them. Not the awkward silence of strangers. The peaceful silence of people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words. After a while, Chloe spoke softly. You know, when people lose someone important, they sometimes spend years trying to protect themselves from feeling that loss again. Liam remained quiet. But sometimes, she continued, the protection becomes its own prison. The words were gentle, never accusing, yet they landed with remarkable clarity. Liam thought about the years after Sophie died. The longer hours. The endless work. The walls he built around himself. He had called it discipline, strength, focus. Perhaps part of it had simply been fear. Fear of caring. Fear of losing. Fear of opening the door to pain again. The realization settled slowly inside him. When he finally looked at Chloe, his expression held a sincerity she had never seen before. You seem to understand people unusually well. Chloe smiled. My mother always said that everyone is carrying something invisible. And what am I carrying? Liam asked quietly. Chloe looked out. Across the river before answering. A great deal of love that never had anywhere to go after Sophie was gone. The city lights shimmered silently beyond the water. For a long moment, neither spoke. Because deep down, Liam knew she was right. And for the first time in 12 years, he began wondering whether it might be possible to stop carrying that love alone. The conversation beside the river marked a turning point neither of them fully understood at the time. The next morning, Manhattan woke beneath a blanket of gray clouds, and Harrison Capital returned to its usual rhythm of deadlines, forecasts, and meetings. Yet beneath the familiar routine, something important had changed. Liam arrived at the office carrying less weight than before. The burden had not disappeared. Grief rarely vanished that easily. But for the first time in years, he no longer felt entirely alone beneath it. Chloe noticed the difference immediately. It appeared in small moments. The way he greeted employees instead of walking past them. The way he listened more carefully during meetings. The way he occasionally paused before dismissing an idea that deserved consideration. The changes were subtle, but people noticed. By midweek, conversations began circulating quietly throughout the company. Nobody understood what had happened. They only knew the atmosphere felt different. On Thursday morning, however, that growing sense of optimism faced its first real challenge. Just after 9 o'clock, urgent messages began appearing across executive inboxes. A major competitor had released a public statement questioning the viability of one of Harrison Capital's largest upcoming development projects. Financial media outlets picked up the story immediately. Industry analysts started speculating. Investors began requesting clarification. Within an hour, concern spread throughout the executive floor. Conference rooms filled. Phones rang constantly. News channels displayed company logos alongside alarming headlines. The project itself remained strong. The facts remained unchanged. Yet perception could move markets almost as powerfully as reality. Chloe watched the situation unfold from her desk. Employees, who had recently regained confidence, suddenly looked nervous again. Managers rushed between meetings carrying stacks of reports. The tension felt familiar. The difference was Liam. Months earlier, he might have handled the crisis alone, carrying every responsibility on his own shoulders. This time was different. At 10:30, he gathered senior executives in the main boardroom. The atmosphere inside felt heavy. Concern lingered in every expression. Liam stood at the front of the room beside a large screen displaying market data and media coverage. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Liam surprised everyone. Before we discuss solutions, he said calmly, I want honest opinions. The room remained silent. Old habits still lingered. Employees exchanged uncertain glances. Liam noticed immediately. Not the answers you think I want, he continued. The answers you genuinely believe. The statement changed everything. Slowly, one executive raised a concern. Another offered a recommendation. A third suggested an alternative strategy. Within minutes, the discussion became more open than any board meeting people could remember. Chloe watched through the glass walls outside. She could almost see the shift happening in real time. Fear was losing ground to trust. When the meeting ended, Executives left carrying clear plans and renewed confidence. The crisis had not disappeared, but now they were facing it together. Around midday, Chloe delivered several updated schedules to Liam's office. She found him reviewing strategy documents beside the window. Sophie's photograph remained nearby, catching soft light from the cloudy sky outside. "You handled that meeting well," Chloe said. Liam looked up. "That sounds suspiciously like a compliment." "It is." A faint smile appeared. "I'm still getting used to hearing those." Chloe laughed softly. Then her expression became thoughtful. "People want to help. Sometimes they just need permission." Liam looked toward the boardroom across the corridor. "I spent years believing leadership meant having all the answers. And now," he glanced toward Sophie's photograph, "now I think leadership might mean helping other people find theirs." The answer lingered between them. Chloe smiled. "That sounds like something Sophie would have said." For a moment, Liam simply looked at the photograph. Then he nodded. "Probably." The afternoon passed quickly. By evening, the company had released a measured response to the competitors' claims. Investors reacted positively. Media speculation began cooling. The immediate danger eased. Yet the most important victory had nothing to do with markets or headlines. It happened quietly inside Harrison Capital itself. Employees had spoken honestly. Leaders had listened. Trust had grown stronger. As darkness settled across the city, Chloe prepared to leave for the evening. Before heading toward the elevators, she glanced through Liam's office door. He was standing beside the window again. But this time, something was different. He was not staring at the city with loneliness in his eyes. He was holding a framed photograph and smiling gently at a memory. The sight stopped her for a moment, because 12 years of grief had not disappeared. Yet for the first time, it seemed to be making room for something else. Hope. And neither Liam nor Chloe realized that much bigger challenges were already approaching. Challenges that would test everything they had built together. Challenges that would reveal who truly stood beside Liam Harrison when success was no longer guaranteed. The warning signs appeared on a cold Monday morning. At first, they seemed insignificant. A delayed investor call. An unexpected cancellation. A series of unusually cautious emails arriving from partners who had been confident only days earlier. Yet by midday, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Something was changing. The executive floor felt different. Not the old fear exactly. Something more dangerous, uncertainty. Chloe sensed it the moment she stepped out of the elevator. Conversations stopped when she approached. Managers exchanged concerned glances. Even Rebecca looked troubled. "What happened?" Chloe asked quietly. Rebecca exhaled. 3 institutional investors postponed meetings this morning. "That is unusual." "Very." Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She immediately headed toward Liam's office. Through the glass wall, she could see him standing beside a conference table surrounded by senior executives. The atmosphere inside looked tense. Charts covered multiple screens. Market reports lay scattered across the table. Nobody appeared relaxed. For the next several hours, meetings continued almost without interruption. More information arrived. Rumors spread through financial media. Competitors continued questioning Harrison Capital's upcoming development project. Analysts began publishing increasingly cautious forecasts. None of the concerns reflected the actual strength of the company. Yet perception was becoming a problem of its own. By late afternoon, the company's share price had begun drifting downward. Not dramatically, but enough to attract attention. Chloe watched employees react. Some remained loyal. Others grew nervous. A few began quietly discussing contingency plans. For the first time since joining Harrison Capital, she witnessed uncertainty spreading faster than confidence. Around 6 o'clock, Liam gathered department leaders in the main boardroom. Rain tapped softly against the windows as darkness settled over Manhattan. The room felt heavier than any meeting Chloe had seen before. Liam stood at the head of the table. Calm, focused, composed. Yet she could see the exhaustion beneath the surface. He had barely slept for days. "The fundamentals of this company remain strong," Liam said. "The project remains sound. We will respond with facts, transparency, and patience." Most people nodded. Some looked reassured. Others looked unconvinced. That was the reality of fear. It often ignored facts. After the meeting ended, executives dispersed slowly. Several stayed behind speaking in hushed voices. Chloe noticed something troubling. A few individuals seemed more concerned about protecting their own positions than helping solve the problem. The realization disappointed her. Success attracted loyalty. Uncertainty revealed character. Later that evening, the executive floor became nearly empty. Lights switched off one by one. Rain continued falling outside. Chloe remained at her desk reviewing schedules for the following week. Across the corridor, Liam was still working. She glanced at the clock. Nearly 9:30. Most people had been gone for hours. Finally, she stood, carried 2 cups of coffee from the break room, and walked toward his office. Liam looked up as she entered. "You are still here." Chloe placed a cup beside him. "So are you." He accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. "Long day. Long week." Liam leaned back slightly. For several moments, neither spoke. The city lights shimmered beyond the rain-streaked windows. Sophie's photograph rested quietly on the shelf nearby. Then Liam surprised her. "Some people are already preparing exit strategies." Chloe was not shocked. She had seen enough to suspect the same thing. Fear makes people focus on themselves. Liam stared into the coffee cup. "I spent years believing success created loyalty. Sometimes it does." Chloe sat down across from him. "But real loyalty only appears when staying becomes difficult." The words settled between them. Liam looked toward her. "And what about you?" Chloe blinked. "What about me? You could work anywhere." His voice remained calm. "Why stay?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because I believe in this company." She paused briefly. "And because I believe in you." Silence followed. Deep. Meaningful. Outside, rain continued tracing silver lines down the glass. Liam looked away toward the skyline. For a moment, he seemed unable to respond. Not because he doubted her sincerity, because he had almost forgotten what unconditional support sounded like. Eventually he spoke. "That is a rare thing to hear." Chloe smiled softly. "Then maybe people do not say it often enough." The following days tested everyone. News coverage intensified. Market speculation continued. More investors requested reassurance. Yet something unexpected happened inside Harrison Capital. While some individuals quietly distanced themselves, many others stepped forward. Teams worked longer hours. Departments collaborated more closely. Employees who once feared speaking began offering ideas. The culture Liam and Chloe had slowly rebuilt was being tested. And to Liam's surprise, it was holding. One Thursday evening, as another difficult day drew to a close, Liam stood alone beside the window in his office. The city stretched endlessly beneath him. Only months earlier, a challenge like this would have felt different. Back then he would have carried every burden alone. Trusted nobody. Shared nothing. Now things had changed. He glanced toward the executive floor beyond his office. A handful of lights still remained on. Employees were staying late voluntarily. Not because they feared him, because they believed in what they were building together. Then his eyes settled on Chloe's desk. She was still there, reviewing reports beneath the warm glow of a desk lamp. Not because she had to be, because she chose to be. For the first time since the crisis began, Liam felt something stronger than concern. Hope. The breakthrough arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning when nobody expected it. After weeks of uncertainty, market pressure, and relentless scrutiny, a detailed independent industry report was released before the opening bell. Analysts across the country began reading it immediately. Investors followed. Financial journalists rushed to publish summaries. By 9 o'clock, the report's conclusion was impossible to ignore. Harrison Capital's development project was not only viable, it was stronger than many experts had originally believed. The numbers were clear. The projections were solid. The criticism that had dominated headlines for weeks suddenly lost its foundation. Inside Harrison Capital, employees watched the news spread across screens in real time. First came cautious optimism, then relief, then something even stronger. Confidence. Phones that had carried anxious questions now delivered congratulations. Investors who had postponed meetings requested new appointments. Partners who had hesitated began reaffirming commitments. For the first time in weeks, smiles appeared throughout the executive floor. Chloe sat at her desk reviewing updates as notification after notification arrived. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. Not because the crisis was over, because the truth had finally caught up with the facts. A short time later, she noticed movement near the windows. Liam stood in his office holding a printed copy of the report. The morning sunlight illuminated the room. Sophie's photograph rested beside him as always. Yet today something felt different. The tension that had followed him for weeks seemed lighter. Not gone, just lighter. When Chloe entered with the latest investor schedule, she found him looking out across the skyline. "Looks like the market finally remembered how to read," she said gently. Liam turned and smiled. A genuine smile. The kind that reached his eyes. Apparently, he placed the report on his desk. "The project is secure." "I never doubted it." Liam looked at her for a moment. "I know." The simple response carried more meaning than either acknowledged. Throughout the day, positive news continued arriving. The company's share price recovered steadily. Analysts revised forecasts. Investor confidence strengthened. Yet the greatest change was happening inside the company itself. Employees walked with renewed energy. Teams celebrated together. People who had worked late nights solving problems finally allowed themselves to breathe. Near midday, Liam made an unexpected announcement. An all-staff gathering would take place in the main auditorium at 4 o'clock. The message spread quickly. Curiosity followed. Liam rarely addressed the entire company unless something significant had occurred. By 4 o'clock, the auditorium was full. Employees filled every available seat. Others stood along the walls. Conversations buzzed with anticipation. Chloe sat near the front beside Rebecca and several department managers. On stage, a simple podium waited beneath soft lighting. A few minutes later, Liam stepped forward. The room immediately fell silent. Yet unlike months earlier, the silence felt different. Not fearful, respectful. Liam looked across the crowd. Hundreds of faces looked back at him. Faces that had worked through uncertainty. Faces that had chosen loyalty when leaving would have been easier. For several moments, he said nothing. Then he began. "A few weeks ago, many people questioned our future." His voice carried clearly through the room. Some questioned our project. Some questioned our company. A few even questioned whether we would endure. The audience listened closely. Liam continued. "Today, the facts speak for themselves. The project remains strong. Our future remains bright. But this is not a story about a report or a market recovery." He paused briefly. "It is a story about people." The room grew even quieter. During difficult times, character reveals itself. I have watched employees support one another. I have watched teams work beyond expectations. I have watched individuals choose loyalty over convenience. Chloe felt emotion tighten unexpectedly in her chest. Liam's gaze moved across the audience. "For many years, I believed leadership meant carrying every burden alone." A faint smile appeared. "I was wrong." Several employees exchanged surprised glances. Liam Harrison rarely admitted mistakes. This company succeeded because people stood together. Because people spoke honestly. Because people cared. Then his eyes settled briefly on Chloe. Only for a second. Yet she felt it immediately. "And because one person reminded me of something I had forgotten." The auditorium remained completely silent. Liam looked out at the crowd once more. "That strength is not measured by how many people fear you." His voice softened slightly. "It is measured by how many people trust you." The words seemed to settle over the entire room. When he finished speaking, applause erupted. Not polite applause. Genuine applause. Warm. Grateful. Earned. Employees rose to their feet. Managers applauded beside junior staff. Departments celebrated together. For several moments, the auditorium became filled with a sound Liam had not heard directed toward him in many years. Appreciation. As the applause continued, Liam glanced toward the front row. Chloe was smiling. Not because the crisis was over. Not because the company had succeeded. Because she could see the man standing on stage had finally become the leader he was always capable of being. And for the first time since Sophie passed away 12 years earlier, Liam Harrison no longer looked like a man surviving his life. He looked like a man ready to live it. 3 months later, winter sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Harrison Capital, casting long golden reflections across the executive floor. The company had not only recovered, it had grown stronger. Investor confidence had returned. New partnerships had been secured. The development project that once attracted criticism was now being recognized as one of the most promising initiatives in the industry. Yet the most remarkable transformation had nothing to do with financial performance. It could be felt in the atmosphere itself. Employees laughed more often. Meetings encouraged discussion instead of silence. New hires arrived excited rather than intimidated. Harrison Capital was still ambitious. Still disciplined, still demanding, but it had become something else as well. Human. On a quiet Friday afternoon, Chloe sat at her desk reviewing the final schedules before the weekend. Looking around the executive floor, she found it almost difficult to remember her first day. The nervous whispers, the tension, the fear that seemed woven into every corridor. So much had changed. Across the room, Rebecca waved while leaving for the evening. Several junior analysts were discussing plans for a charity event organized through the Sophie Harrison Foundation. Others were already heading home to families and friends. The building felt alive in a way it never had before. A soft knock interrupted Chloe's thoughts. She looked up. Liam stood beside her desk. "Do you have a moment?" Chloe smiled. "For the chief executive? I suppose I can make time." The familiar response earned a quiet laugh. Together they walked toward the private dining area overlooking the city. The same place where Liam had once sat alone every afternoon beside a window and a photograph. The same place where an empty chair had remained untouched for years. The city stretched endlessly below them. Snow dusted distant rooftops. The river reflected pale winter sunlight. Everything felt calm. Liam stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "Do you remember your first week here?" Chloe nodded. "Everyone thought I was making a terrible decision, including me." She laughed softly. "At least you were honest." Liam looked out across the skyline. "When you arrived, people feared me." Chloe did not argue. There was no need. It was true. "I spent years believing respect came from strength." He paused briefly. "What I really created was distance." The words carried no bitterness, only understanding. Chloe listened quietly. "Then you showed up," Liam continued, "and started asking questions nobody else would ask. Someone had to. Most people would not have." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt familiar now. Comfortable. Earned. Liam reached into his jacket and removed a small envelope. He handed it to Chloe. Curious, she opened it carefully. Inside was a formal document. Her eyes widened as she read. It announced a new leadership position within Harrison Capital, Director of Community Development and Employee Culture. The role would oversee the Sophie Harrison Foundation's initiatives while helping shape the future culture of the company itself. At the bottom of the document appeared her name. Chloe looked up immediately. "Liam." He smiled gently. "You earned it." Emotion flickered across her face. "This is not just a promotion." "No." His gaze moved toward the city beyond the windows. "It is a chance to continue what you started." Chloe stared at the document again, then back at him. "You really believe I can do this?" The answer came without hesitation. More than anyone. For several seconds, she could not speak. Not because of the position, because of the trust behind it. Finally, she folded the document carefully and smiled. "Thank you." Liam nodded. "No." His voice softened. "Thank you." Chloe looked at him curiously. Liam turned toward the dining area, toward the table where he had spent so many years alone. Then his gaze settled on the chair opposite his own, the chair that was no longer empty. "You once told me that the strongest people make others feel safe enough to grow." Chloe recognized the words immediately. Liam smiled. "I did not understand them at the time." He paused. "I do now." The afternoon sunlight filled the room with warm gold. Outside, the city moved endlessly forward. Inside, something felt complete. Not because every problem had been solved, not because life had become perfect, but because healing had finally found a place to begin. Liam glanced toward the silver-framed photograph resting nearby. Sophie's smile seemed unchanged by time. Yet for the first time in many years, looking at it no longer filled him with emptiness. Instead, it reminded him of connection, of purpose, of people worth caring about. Chloe followed his gaze. "She would be proud of you." Liam looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that carried peace instead of pain. "I hope so." Outside the window, sunlight reflected across the skyline as another day slowly drew to a close. Employees headed home. Elevators descended. Office lights dimmed one by one. Yet inside Harrison Capital, something important remained. A lesson stronger than fear. Stronger than success. Stronger even than grief. Because in the end, Liam Harrison discovered that people do not remember the power you hold over them. They remember how you made them feel. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is not lead with authority. Sometimes it is allowing someone else's kindness to change them. The company had gained a better leader. The employees had gained a stronger culture. Chloe had found a place where her voice mattered. And Liam had finally learned what Sophie had tried to teach him all along. A life measured only by achievement eventually feels empty. A life shared with others becomes something far greater. As the final light of day settled across the city, the empty chair beside Liam was empty no longer. And neither was he. The man who ruled through silence learned trust, and the woman expected to quit became the voice that changed the room. Sometimes the right person arrives not to love you first, but to help you become worthy of love.